Hi everyone, my name is Richard Socher and I'm the CEO of You.com. Better, better, never done, I think is a great motto. I first heard it from Mark Hawkins, at the time the CFO at Salesforce. And I love it because it applies to almost every function inside a company. And it also applies, I think, to humanity. So at the highest level, you can think about the scientific revolution, getting better and better explanations in sort of the David Deutsch sense. And getting better and better explanations allows us to understand the world better and better. And that allows us to make progress and create new technologies that then eventually help more and more people. At the same time, you can go in and say, we have a process right now in HR, or we have a certain piece of our indexing technology, could be faster. And so you can always improve the speed of an answer to an agent. The agents can eventually even self-improve so that, it works all the way to recursive superintelligence, this motto of better, better, never done. And so, it works across different scales and across different functions within companies. I do think the world is accelerating, the world of AI is accelerating, and to think about better, better, never done is incredibly important to avoid stasis, to avoid falling behind, and to rethink every single process you have with AI in mind. We are too late to explore the Earth, too early to explore the galaxies, but right on time to explore superintelligence. And I think what I mean by this is that as a generation, you kind of think about what's really relevant, where can you really push the frontier of knowledge and technology forward. And it feels to me like superintelligence is that moment that this generation has. There are previous generations that moved from no human could fly to 60 years later, we could land on the moon. This generation could basically make computers go from they are not really that capable to they will have incredible intelligence and will be able to do almost anything for us that we want them to. I think ultimately superintelligence will enable us to go from having any kind of idea to actually seeing it implemented, first digitally and eventually with robotics, even physically. And so the only bottlenecks are going to be your creativity and your agency to actually use this technology for something that you care about in the world and for creating the change that you want to see. Agency to me is a mindset of having some amount of constructive optimism and understanding that any change that happened throughout history was done by people. And we're all just people, ultimately. But some people think and have a belief that they can change something, and so they go and try to do it. And many just think the world is fixed in a certain way, and they have a certain small role in that, and they cannot really change the world and change how it works and how it's run. So one thing I love about Silicon Valley is actually that there are a lot of people who come into Silicon Valley that have this almost weird sense, right? You have to be almost unreasonable to make change happen, because if you're very reasonable and everyone tells you like, no, this is just how the world is run, then you just keep doing that. And so agency is kind of questioning some of those assumptions and then just doing things. AI is really hard to navigate because there is indeed some hype, and people think that once you have superintelligence, it's going to rise exponentially and then take over everything, both in terms of it'll destroy all jobs or it'll kill us all, and that'll happen in like a very short amount of time. But then there's also reality in that AI is changing every industry out there. Just like tractors have changed agriculture and other sort of industries that are adjacent to that, AI is now changing almost every intellectual work that we can do. And so that is reality. But then inside, there's just between the black and white, there's a lot of gray. And the gray often comes with like AI is not quite as accurate, right? So we have to give it better knowledge, better search results that actually then are fed into a chatbot or a large language model for them to summarize them, make them accurate, and then also come back with citations so you can actually learn to trust AI and know where its data and its facts came from. I think there will be more AI agents than people on the web, largely because there are only so many people and we don't grow exponentially anymore. Humanity has slowed down its growth quite a lot in terms of how many people and kids we have. And then at the same time, each person can spawn hundreds or even thousands of agents and then have those agents do things for them on the web. The web is essentially a great projection of the relevant economic reality of people into the digital world. And in that digital world, AI can essentially act for us. And so right now, most people don't have an assistant that will just go on the internet and do something for them. But once we all have access to agents, we can have them do all these medial tasks like book a flight, book a vacation, think about and do some research on a product category that you really care about, do financial research and read thousands of websites. And so what's interesting here is that some people think, oh, these agents will take human jobs, but really it'll be Jevons Paradox over and over again, where having more agents will actually just allow us to do more with AI, more with the internet even. But it will also challenge some parts of the internet, like the ads model. So the Jevons Paradox came from this researcher Jevons who looked into different steam engines, and he realized the steam engines are getting more and more efficient. And so a lot of economists thought that that means we'd use less coal with more and more efficient steam engines. Now, what actually happened is we just used more steam engines in more places, eventually to create electricity and so on. And so the paradox was that even though a certain product category became more efficient, we actually ended up not using less of the required inputs, but actually using more of them. And the way this is playing out is that when we have more intelligence, we will not need fewer things to get done. We actually want more things to be done. When models get more efficient, the marginal cost of intelligence goes down. We will actually not use less intelligence. We will not, when models get more efficient in terms of the GPUs and the energy they require, that is required, we will not use fewer less electricity. We'll just use even more electricity because we want even more intelligence to eventually come out and be usable in the world. And so that Jevons Paradox is playing out over and over again right now in AI. I think almost every consumer product will have to be rebuilt with agents in mind. So concretely, the internet was built, a lot of it for free, because people click on ads. But if I ask my agent to go book a flight and it may choose to do that on Expedia, then it won't be distracted by, oh, maybe you also want to fly to the Bahamas next summer, and an ad in general, right? And so what that means is that companies who are solely dependent on advertising revenue on their websites will need to rethink how they interact with agents. Maybe they provide a service to an agent, maybe they're micropayments. I can also see completely new kinds of ad models where you'd have like pass-through ads. Like if you use the content from the site, you also have to show the ad on the site, and like having some kind of cryptographic relationship and system that ensures that is happening. So there are all kinds of different challenges as agents sort of use the web to get things done for their people and the managers of those agents. But also, there's so much opportunity because like we see this in search, for example. Search and browsers are great examples of consumer technologies that are being reinvented for agents. You now want an agent to have a browser, but an agent doesn't have to have a nice big screen and visualize everything the way a person does. Sometimes an agent can be seeing a slower website. Sometimes you want that agent to be really fast. Search engine is another great example. We actually have now built and rebuild search engines from scratch for agents at U.com, where instead of just seeing 10 blue links with a very short snippet, an agent could actually see a very long snippet. They could even see the whole website. And maybe depending on the use case, you want to see more or less associated with each website, because then the agent can summarize all of that and then show it and display it to the user in a format that the user actually cares about in that moment. As soon as I had to do a lot of gardening work and yard work as a kid, I thought about automating boring things that aren't that interesting. And so I think that will happen more and more also in intellectual work, where just there are a ton of emails where it's just like, well, if I get this email, then I should just go through this website and fill out some DMV form or something or another. Or I need to schedule a meeting and people need to go back and forth. And there's just so many small things that aren't really why someone started a certain type of job. Ultimately, a lot of us need to get to a state where the work that we produce is more and more relevant and requires a certain amount of not just agency, but also creativity and empathy with the other people in that job. And so what AI enables us to do is essentially work on much more relevant things of why we got into a job in the first place versus just the boring, repetitive sort of work that often fills the gaps in all our calendars. I do think that most people don't love the very repetitive nature of their jobs, and it just gets more and more boring. I also think maybe some people do eventually just get used to it, because if you hate it so much, right, but there's no way out of it, then you get very frustrated. So people make sort of peace with it. But I think ultimately jobs will be much more fulfilling when they require creativity, agency, empathy, interactions with other people, rather than filling out forms. We see this, for instance, when it comes to doctor-patient interactions. It used to be that every doctor could spend at most half their time with patients, and the other half was filling out forms, doing follow-ups, typing up what the patient was saying. All of that can now be automated, and doctors can actually do what they wanted to do when they got into medicine, which is help patients, talk to patients, work together with them and cure them. And so I think that is just one of many beautiful examples. But those kinds of superfluous, bureaucratic measurement tasks are in almost every job. And so I think with AI, will make all of us much more productive and have to be able to basically build or sell and spend a lot less time measuring things in between. I do think people will look back at this time favorably, though it might not feel like that right now for everyone. I totally acknowledge that. I think the impact that AI will have, and generally the impact that technology progress has had, is in the short term often disruptive, and it feels like you don't feel necessarily the progress within a year or 5 years. You just, as you zoom out, you see it more and more. And so when, some people were able to produce more food with agriculture than with hunting and running around for a long time, some of the hunters were like, well, that's my skill set. That's the only thing I know, is how to go into the bush and hunt for a long time. There are these short-term transition phases, and during those transition phases, I think it's a job of a government to help and support its people in those transitions to learn new skills. But when you go back and you ask anyone, would you rather live 100 years ago, 150 years ago, with no warm shower, no transportation, and so on, it would be very unlikely anybody would want to actually go back. One of my tricks on predicting the future is to often think about the goods and services that only wealthy people have access to that are very desirable, and then think about which technologies could actually scale up the supply for those goods and services. And especially in the AI era, which of these goods and services are bottlenecked on intelligence? And just a few examples are personal assistants, personal tutors for your kids, and personal healthcare teams. Right now, a normal person cannot afford to pay 5 doctors, all of whom very educated, very expensive, to research some rare form of cancer that they have. But if you're really wealthy, you do donate money to hospitals. You do have researchers who research very carefully all of what's possible and maybe even try to push the frontier of knowledge forward for a particularly rare disease that your child has. Now, I think when we have AI that can do that for us, anyone will be able to have that, and I think that will be amazing. And as we see more and more progress in healthcare, I hope more and more people will realize that is partially because of AI, and AI has all these incredibly useful, powerful ways to make our lives better. I think technology kind of moves in a cumulative combination of S-curves that have sort of short-term exponentials that then flatten out as the technology kind of gets distributed everywhere. We've seen that sort of over humanity's history more and more, and we see that even in the smaller area of just AI. And in just AI, we've had a lot of progress from sort of pre-training on very large internet data sets, but eventually that is now flattening out. And in order to get to the next big step function increase and sharp S-curve phase, we need to, I think, go to the next meta level. And that next meta level is to not just ask AI to replace manual feature engineering in natural language processing, for instance, or in computer vision, with learned systems like neural networks that learn from raw pixels or raw internet text and learn very useful representations, but instead go one level above and even ask, how do we actually innovate in AI in the first place? How do we make inventions in AI? And the truth is, they're usually in the scientific method, there are 3 steps. There's the ideation, the implementation, and the validation of ideas. Those 3 steps are basically true for almost anything in physics, chemistry, biology, and AI and computer science. And so we now have the ability to actually get through those 3 steps in AI completely automatically. And that has been enabled by the fact that AI is code and can now also code. And when you put these 2 together, you can go through the ideation, implementation, validation phase very, very quickly. And that means that we can basically make somewhat obsolete the job of an AI researcher. Because when you have an open-ended system similar to biological or technological evolution, and you allow that system to run towards some goals and build its own environments and come up with new ideas on itself, eventually even build a certain sense of self-awareness of its own shortcomings, then we believe that we can have a much smoother surface on the frontier of AI capabilities compared to what we currently have, where it's sort of very spiky because some people created one particular data set or one particular reinforcement learning objective function, and the AI kind of spiked towards that, but had very sort of weird deep valleys of the lack of capabilities. There's sort of waves in technology and in people's thinking, and whenever I see a wave that's too big, I start to question the assumptions. I think there's maybe just like either genetically or through memes or genes, like a little bit of a contrarian also in me that's just like thinks, well, if everyone runs that way, maybe we should question why, and maybe there are other better paths. And so I think there's a bit of this personal sort of contrarian bend, but then being contrarian isn't helpful unless you're right. So you also have to think from first principles, combine first principles thinking, and then question sort of orthodoxy or like the commonly held beliefs, and see if you can come up with better solutions. I think what's meaningful is ultimately, for me personally, associated with what is pushing the frontier of human knowledge forward and of ways of thinking about existing problems, is to build things that don't exist yet in the world and to push the frontier of knowledge forward.